Chapter 21 of Billie Bradley at Treasure Cove by Janet D. Wheeler. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. A brave rescue. Billie Bradley clung to the side of the rowboat for a moment, drew in a long breath, then dived straight down through the water. She stayed under as long as she could, feeling frantically about her. Then bursting lungs forced her to the surface. Once more she tried, but with no more success. The third time her groping fingers felt something. Caught. Held. There was Vi, sagging, helpless, the cloth of her bathing suit caught in an anchor chain. The need of air was torturing Billie. She could not hold her breath much longer. Whatever was done must be done quickly. With the strength of desperation, she caught Vi in her arms, braced her feet against the side of the anchor chain, and pulled. There was a rip as the cloth of the bathing suit gave way. The release came so suddenly that Billie rolled over in the water. Vi still clutched in her arms. She needed air. Her whole body was in aching need of it. With Vi's dead weight to lift, it was not easy to force her way to the surface. But she managed it, and soon the salt, fresh breeze was full in her face. The first breath of it brought her strength. She lifted Vi, tugging at the girl's hair to keep her face above the water. Almost before she saw the boys, she felt herself relieved of the burden. A strong arm was flung about her shoulders, holding her up. "All in, old girl?" asked Chet's voice. "No," gasped Billie. "I'm all right. It's Vi. Is she... They are getting her into the boat. Is she... No, only unconscious. Swallowed half the ocean, I guess, poor kid. Come on now, you need a little help yourself." But though Chet's solicitude was sweet to her, Billie knew she was all right. There was pain in her chest and her lungs still labored, but that would pass. Resting her hand on Chet's shoulder, she swam to the boat, held to it for a moment, looking in. They were working over Vi, raising her hands high above her head, then out and down, pressing the hands hard against the ribs. Artificial breathing, forcing the water out of the lungs, breath into them. Chet would have helped Billie into the boat, but she shook her head. "Wait just a minute," she pleaded. "I want to see." There was a long, shuddering sigh. Ferd and Teddy ceased their work as Vi opened her eyes and looked wanly up at them. Oh, she whispered, "that awful chain." Laura, who had been crouching in the bottom of the boat, reached over and took Vi's hand in hers. "It's all right, Vi, darling," she said. "You're safe now. Billie saved you." "Billie!" Vi opened her eyes again, and this time they were bright with tears. "Billie's always saving somebody," she said. They found out after a while how it had all happened. "I didn't want to seem yellow and stay behind while all the rest of you were so brave and everything," she explained, "so I got up and tried to dive like Billie did. But I hit my leg on the side of the boat as I went in. You know, I never could dive properly." "Never mind that," put in Billie gently. "And my leg doubled up in an awful cramp. I tried to keep myself up, but I couldn't. It was then I called out." "And a minute later you went down," Billie added. "There wasn't a sign of you. It scared me horribly." "A mere nothing to the way it scared me," Vi assured her, so drolly that her listeners chuckled. "Then I got tangled in the anchor chain, and when I tried to get loose, I couldn't. After that, I can't remember anything. I guess I must have fainted from fright." "Or from swallowing half a ton of seawater," Ferd added. "Poor kid, if it hadn't been for Billie here, you would surely have been in a bad way." "Which reminds me," said Vi gently, "that I haven't heard a description of Billie's part at all." Reluctantly, Billie gave the details of the rescue, and was forced to listen for some time to Vi's gratitude and the praises of her friends. "But I was scared to death all the time," she protested. "If you were scared, it was because of me, not yourself," Vi asserted shrewdly. "I know you, Billie Bradley. You can't fool me." And after what had been so near tragedy, the girls and boys were only too glad to return to shore. There Vi rested on the sand with Billie, grateful for the reviving warmth of the sun. The others went swimming again, but Billie and Vi remained on the shore. They had had enough of the water for one day. "I don't want to even sit here and watch the others," Vi said suddenly. I want to go somewhere where there isn't any ocean. Billie, let's get dressed." "All right," said Billie, promptly. "But after that, where do we go?" "To see the trained mice in the show," Vi said. Billie thought she was joking. "What do you mean, trained mice?" she demanded. Vi, who had been lazily dribbling sand through her fingers, opened her eyes wide. "Do you mean to tell me that Teddy never told you about the trained mice?" she demanded. "Teddy never did," chuckled Billie. "What is all this I've missed?" "There's a hardware store in the village," Vi elucidated. "It seems they have 3 trained white mice, and twice a day they put them, the mice, that is, through their paces. A sort of trick, I suppose, to lure people into the store." Billie nodded. "They knew you wouldn't have the nerve to leave without buying something. If it's only a can opener," she laughed. "All right, let's go." The others came up to the beach just then, and Billie explained the project to them. "We're coming too," Laura promptly decided. "Nothing so thrilling as trained mice shall escape me." "I suppose," she added, a bit dubiously, "they are kept in a cage?" "Oh, absolutely," Teddy assured her. "A big white cage with the bars so close together even a white mouse can't squeeze through." "I suppose a gray mouse might?" Billie chuckled. They dressed hurriedly and started at once for the village. The hardware store was dingy and small, but it had a salty atmosphere all of its own. The place boasted the stock common to all hardware stores, but it contained other things, too. There were fishing lines and tackle, cans for live bait, and artificial minnows so cunningly fashioned that one half expected to see them swim off, water or no water, to join their myriad living counterparts in the ocean. There were old mastheads and rusting anchor chains, fish nets of all sizes and descriptions. "What a fascinating place!" cried Billie, as she stepped over a coil of rope. "One might almost think we were on the deck of a boat." "But where are the mice?" Laura queried. Vi squealed with mingled delight and distaste. "Over here!" she cried. "Oh, look, aren't they cute?" "At a distance," Billie agreed. "I wonder what they do." The proprietor came out of a small room at the rear of the store just then, and Billie realized with delight how well he fitted this odd shop. He looked like a retired sea captain, which was exactly what he was. He was rugged and tall and had a flowing gray beard. The tufts of grizzled hair that framed his ruddy face made him look like some queer, good-natured bird. There was a twinkle in his eye as he approached the young folks. "And what can I do for you today?" he asked. Chet pointed to the cage of white mice. "We were hoping you might put your pets through their paces for our benefit," he said. The old man scratched his grizzled head. The expression on his face was very doubtful. "Well, now, you see, my son's the one puts them mice through their tricks. I ain't exactly used to them, myself." He paused and appeared to ruminate, staring at the mice. Billie gently prompted him. "Isn't your son here?" she asked. "No'm," replied the old man. "And what's more, he ain't likely to get here this afternoon, being his day off." He looked at the young people apologetically. "When the lad gets to fishing, time, it ain't apt to trouble him none." "Oh, dear," Vi felt unreasonably disappointed. "We did so want to see the show." The old man considered for another moment, and a sudden twinkle came into his eyes. "I wouldn't like for you to be disappointed," he said. "Maybe I can put them through a few of the tricks anyhow." He drew the big white cage from the show window and placed it upon the counter. The girls giggled and drew back. "Suppose they should get loose," Vi whispered. "Perish the thought," Laura chuckled. "What a terrible imagination you have, Vi, anyway." The old man pushed the glasses back on his forehead and set to work. In other words, the show began. Gradually the girls forgot their repugnance to rodents in general, in admiration of the gifts of these rodents in particular. They pressed closer to the cage as the old man put the animals through their rather spectacular performances. He placed tiny hurdles in the cage, and at once the mice formed on the starting line. A clap of the hands was a signal to start, and off they went, jumping the hurdles in truly admirable style. A mouse with a tiny gray spot on its head was the winner. Up it trotted, almost to the door of the cage, where a miniature victor's wreath was placed about his neck. "It should be on his head," the old man admitted, "but it don't sort of stay on there long. So my boy, he got the notion of making it a necklace instead." "They are adorable!" exclaimed Billie, then turned to the showman eagerly. "Let's see what more they can do," she begged. The small actors possessed a considerable repertoire, which the old man proceeded to exhibit. He put a small cart in the cage. One of the mice placed himself in position between the shafts, while the storekeeper adjusted the harness. Another took its place in the rear of the cart, presumably as a passenger, while the third climbed to the driver's seat. Off they went at a great clip around and around the cage, not once colliding with any of the objects in it. "I call that remarkable," remarked Chet, in genuine admiration. "They are well-trained little beasts, all right." The old man seemed well pleased with the praise. He smiled and pushed the glasses so far up on his forehead that they mingled with the tufts of grizzled hair. "My boy spends a lot of time with them," he said. "Some day, he says, he's going to show them on the stage and make a sight of money out of—" He was interrupted by a shrill cry from Vi. "Look out!" she cried. "You've left the door of the cage open." Vi's warning came too late. The white mice, seeing a chance of escape, were not slow to take it. Out they popped, two of them running along the counter and disappearing in a pile of merchandise heaped up there, while the other landed on the floor at the feet of the girls. Wild shrieks rent the air. Billie climbed to the opposite counter. Vi made for a stepladder, while Laura headed straight for the door. This was an unfortunate move for Laura. She forgot the coil of rope in the way, stumbled over it, and fell headlong. While the boys rushed to her aid, the old man scrambled for his mice. He was evidently panic-stricken for fear they would escape. "The lad'll never forgive me," chattered the poor old fellow, "and I don't blame him. I've up and gone and lost a fortune for him, so I have." Now Billie, perched on the counter, saw something coming toward her. There could be no mistake about it. It was one of the liberated white mice. She felt her flesh crawl and wanted to shriek and run. However, the lament of the poor old man was fresh in her ears, and, inspired by it, came a quick resolution. "I can catch one of the little beasts for him, anyway," she thought. There was an empty can near her on the counter. Quick as thought, Billie Bradley reached for this, and as the mouse scuttled toward her, turned it neatly over its head. "I've got one of them," she called triumphantly. "And here's another." Ferd, his hair tousled, appeared from somewhere beneath the counter, a small terrified white object held snugly in his hand. "Praises be!" ejaculated the old man. "I've got the third one. Put him here, folks, and let's shut the door on this tarnation cage." But Billie was firm. "If you want your mouse, you'll have to come and get it," she said. "I wouldn't touch it for $1,000,000. Once the door of the cage was safely shut, the young folks lingered for no further exhibition on the part of the talented white mice. "Never again," declared Laura, as the young people made their way to the street, and thence toward Mrs. Wellington Opp's boarding house. "I've seen enough of white mice to last me the rest of my life." The following morning, Billie Bradley and her chums started for the Point once more. Ben was eager to accompany them, but his ankle was still painful. He admitted reluctantly that he would only be a drag upon the young folks. "It's too rough going on the Point. I'm like to hurt myself and get laid up for a long time. But if you find anything," his blue eyes blazed with a feverish enthusiasm, "then you can come and tell me, and I'll get there even if I have to be carried on a stretcher. So heave to, my hearties. Here's luck to you." They set out with revived enthusiasm. During the long hours of the forenoon, they worked hard with pick and shovel. The enthusiasm lasted past lunchtime and into the early hours of the afternoon. Then they began to lag. Their arms ached, their backs were weary. "I wish we'd never heard of a treasure," cried Laura rebelliously. She flung herself down on the beach and kicked at a small sand dune resentfully. "We might have had a wonderful time here this summer if we'd never heard of treasure. I don't believe there is one, anyway." The others flung down their various implements and joined Laura on the sand. They were glad enough to rest. They were discouraged, and all, in their hearts, were frankly skeptical. "I believe Miss Pauline was right after all," Vi said. "We thought we would have the laugh on her when we got back to Three Towers laden with Chinese loot. Now the shoe will be on the other foot." "Oh, well," said Teddy Jordan, pacifically. "We're getting a pretty good time out of it, anyway. It isn't all loss, even if we don't find any buried fortune." "Poor Ben!" exclaimed Billie suddenly. "If his wonderful hope of riches turns out to be only a beautiful dream, what a terrible disappointment it will be. It won't be so bad for us. We're young. But he's so old. It's probably his last chance to find comfort and happiness." "And there's Mary," said Vi softly. "Yes," Billie agreed soberly. "There's Mary." They were all silent for a few moments, busy with their own thoughts. "This is really Treasure Cove, isn't it?" Laura asked suddenly, indicating with a sweep of her hand the large body of water so deeply indenting the shore. Billie nodded. "And Ben's cabin is on the farther side of the cove, where the wounded mutineer came ashore?" Billie's vague gaze suddenly became fixed. Her mouth dropped wide open, and she sat there, staring. As the young folks looked at her, they found themselves filled with an odd, breathtaking excitement. "Billie!" cried Laura. "What's the matter?" Billie got slowly to her feet. Her gaze was still fixed, but her face had begun to glow with color. "Chet, I gave you the map, didn't I?" "You did," answered the lad. "Want it?" "Please." Billie took the bit of paper in her hand. She found, to her surprise, that the hand was trembling. For a moment she studied the map. "Come here, you people," she said then. "See if you see what I do." The others looked at the map, then followed the direction of Billie's pointing finger. They saw a rock not so different at first glance from the others that lined the face of the cliff. They were inclined to be puzzled. It was Vi who saw it first, the difference between this rock and all the others. "It has a face," she cried. "The face of some animal. A rhinoceros. No, an elephant. That's it, an elephant with a short trunk." "Some imagination," scoffed Ferd. "I must say—" No, she's right," cried Billie. "Look at the map, and you'll see she's right. It's the clue," she cried, a little wildly. "The clue we've all been looking for so long and couldn't find. Look at the map. Look at the map." They did, studying it closely. Then they all saw a resemblance, so rough, crude, vague, that they could not wonder at themselves for not having discovered it sooner. Still, it was there. In the rough drawing of the map, they saw now, for the first time, the suggestion of an animal head. It might have been almost anything, but as they examined it more closely, they agreed that Vi's description fitted. A rather extraordinary elephant with a short trunk, and the rock upon which they gazed now bore the same bizarre resemblance. Before they knew what they were doing, they started running pell-mell toward that rock. Their eyes never wavered from it, for it was their long-sought clue, the finger directing them to what? At the foot of the rock, Chet came to a sudden stop. He stretched out his arms, cutting off their advance. "Don't come any closer," he cried. "Stay where you are." End of chapter 21.